The information provided in this video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. It does not constitute professional marketing, legal, career, or financial advice. Social media trends, algorithm behaviors, and market conditions are subject to rapid change. Any strategies discussed are based on historical trends and case studies. They do not suggest a specific probability of success for every individual or business. Viewers are advised to conduct their own due diligence and consult with qualified professionals before making significant business or investment decisions based on the content of this presentation. The American social media landscape is currently undergoing its most volatile shift since the introduction of the smartphone. Right now, 90% of the content being produced by brands and creators in the United States is effectively invisible. Despite the billions of dollars spent on production and the millions of man-hours poured into content calendars, the average American consumer has developed a physiological resistance to traditional digital marketing. We are witnessing the death of the traditional social media follower model. In the US market, having a million followers no longer ensures you a million views, and for many it does not even ensure 10,000. The era of organic reach through legacy audience building is over, replaced by an aggressive, interest-based graph that prioritizes raw retention over brand loyalty. If you are still operating under the strategies of 2022, you are not just falling behind, you are shouting into a void that has already been boarded up. In this masterclass, we are going to deconstruct the 3 specific frameworks that are currently dominating the US attention economy, revealing why certain unknown creators are outperforming Fortune 500 companies, and how you can restructure your entire digital presence to capitalize on these historical shifts in consumer psychology. The problem you are likely facing today is the attention gap. In the United States, the average person is exposed to between 4,000 and 10,000 advertisements and brand impressions every single day. This has created a cognitive filter so dense that the human brain now processes and rejects content in less than 400 milliseconds. If your strategy does not account for this biological reality, your message will never even reach the conscious mind of your target audience. This video solves that specific problem. We are going to move past the surface-level advice of posting consistently or using trending audio. Instead, we are going to dive deep into the mechanics of high-velocity content, the architecture of the American interest graph, and the exact step-by-step processes used by top-tier US agencies to capture and hold attention in the most competitive market on Earth. To understand where we are going, we must first look at the historical trends of the American digital consumer. Historically, the US market was built on the concept of the social graph. This was the era of Facebook and early Instagram, where your feed was determined by who you knew and who you chose to follow. However, since the late 2010s, we have seen a total pivot toward the interest graph. This means the algorithm no longer cares about who you are. It cares about what you are watching right now. For creators and businesses, this is both a massive risk and a monumental opportunity. It means the barrier to entry has never been lower, but the requirement for excellence has never been higher. Let us begin with a deep dive into the first pillar of our strategy: radical authenticity and the demise of polished production. In the US market, there is a growing trend of aesthetic fatigue. For years, American consumers were fed highly curated, filtered, and perfectly lit content. Case studies now show that this high production value often triggers an immediate ad response in the viewer's brain, causing them to skip before the message is even delivered. Historical data from major US short-form platforms suggests that content filmed on a mobile device in a natural setting often sees a 20 to 30% higher retention rate than content filmed in a professional studio. This brings us to the first step-by-step detail of our masterclass: the lo-fi strategic pivot. This does not mean your content should be low quality. It means it must feel immediate and unscripted. To implement this, you must first identify your core human element. In the American market, people do not buy from logos, they buy from people. You need to transition your brand voice from a corporate entity to a relatable narrator. For example, look at the historical trend of successful US tech companies. The ones that dominate social media are those that allow their engineers, developers, or even their social media managers to become the face of the brand. They use direct-to-camera addresses, behind-the-scenes footage that shows the messiness of the process, and a tone of voice that mimics a FaceTime call with a friend rather than a television commercial. Expanding on this, we must analyze the hookery-hook methodology. In a deep-dive analysis of viral US content, we find that the most successful videos do not just have one hook at the beginning. They utilize a series of microhooks every 6 to 10 seconds. This is a response to the dopamine loop that characterizes modern American media consumption. To execute this, You must structure your content using a value density framework. Every 10 seconds of your video must provide one of three things: a new piece of information, a shift in visual perspective, or an emotional payoff. If you go more than 15 seconds without one of these three elements, the probability of the viewer swiping away increases by over 50%. Let us look at a specific case study involving a mid-sized US apparel brand. They originally spent $50,000 on a high-end commercial for a new product launch. The video featured professional models, slow-motion shots, and a cinematic soundtrack. When they posted this to their social channels, the average watch time was less than 3 seconds. They then took the same product, gave it to an employee, and told them to film a rant about why they loved the fabric while sitting in their car during a lunch break. The second video, which cost $0 to produce, went viral, accumulating millions of views and driving a record number of sales. Why? Because the American consumer perceived the first video as an intrusion and the second video as a recommendation. This leads us into the technical details of the comment-first strategy. In the United States, the comment section is often more important than the video itself. It is a secondary layer of entertainment and community. To master the American market, you must treat your comment section as a primary content pillar. This involves planting conversational seeds within your video. For example, instead of stating a fact as absolute, you might frame it as a debatable perspective. This encourages viewers to enter the comments to share their own opinions, which signals to the algorithm that your content is highly engaging, thereby pushing it to a wider audience. Historical trends show that videos with a high comment-to-view ratio have a significantly longer shelf life on the algorithm, sometimes continuing to gain traction months after the initial post. Furthermore, we must address the micro-niche dominance theory. The US market is too large and too fragmented to target everyone. The most successful social media strategies today involve hyper-targeting a specific subculture or tribe. Whether it is clean tech enthusiasts, mid-century modern DIYers, or corporate burnout survivors, you must speak the specific language, use the specific slang, and address the specific pain points of that niche. When you try to appeal to everyone in the American market, you end up appealing to no one. Depth is currently more valuable than breadth. A community of 10,000 hyper-engaged followers in a specific niche is worth more in terms of potential outcomes than 1 million passive followers who do not share a common identity. As we continue this masterclass, we will delve into the data-driven approach to content timing and frequency. While many believe there is a perfect time to post, historical data suggests that for the US market, frequency and consistency of signal are far more important than the clock. You are training the algorithm to understand who your content is for. Every post is a data point. If you post sporadically, the algorithm's confidence score in your content remains low. If you post with high frequency, specifically targeting your micro-niche, the algorithm develops a clearer picture of your ideal viewer, allowing it to place your content in front of the people most likely to engage with it. We are just scratching the surface of these 3 winning strategies. In the next sections of this deep dive, we will break down the exact psychological triggers used in high-converting US copy, the shadow SEO techniques for platform searchability, and the framework for turning a viral moment into a sustainable long-term brand. The American market is a battlefield of attention, and to win, you need more than just good content. You need a systemic understanding of how human attention is captured, processed, and converted in the digital age. To master the American social media market in 2026, you must first understand the transition from the attention economy to the trust economy. For the last decade, creators and brands focused on the volume of eyes. In 2026, volume is a commodity because AI-generated content has saturated the platforms, making it easier than ever to fill a feed, but harder than ever to stay in a mind. The first winning strategy we must dissect is the identity signal framework. This strategy moves away from general interest and leans into the specific sociological identities that American consumers use to define themselves in an increasingly digital world. Imagine a creator named Jackson based in Austin, Texas. Jackson is a freelance software architect who noticed a historical trend. His technical tutorials were getting decent views, but his engagement was stagnant. In 2026, the American viewer is no longer satisfied with just learning a skill. They want to belong to a subculture. Jackson pivoted his strategy using the identity signal framework. Instead of making videos titled "How to Use Python for Data Analysis," he began creating content titled "Why Rural Tech Workers Are Abandoning Silicon Valley for the Midwest." By shifting the focus from the tool to the identity of the user, Jackson tapped into a high-stakes cultural conversation. The potential outcomes of this shift were immediate. His retention rates tripled because he wasn't just providing information, he was providing a mirror for his audience to see themselves in. This leads us to the step-by-step implementation of the identity signal framework. Step 1 is the audience archetype deep dive. You cannot simply target a demographic like males aged 18 to 35. In the 2026 US market, that is too broad to be effective. You must identify a specific psychographic trigger. Are they the overworked corporate parent, the Gen Z urban homesteader, or the sustainable tech minimalist? Once you have identified this archetype, you must audit the specific vocabulary, aesthetic preferences, and common grievances of that group. Historical trends show that the more specific the grievance, the higher the shareability of the content. Step 2 is the creation of the contrast hook. In a sea of AI-generated perfection, the American audience craves friction. The contrast hook involves taking a widely accepted truth within your niche and presenting a data-backed counter-argument. Case studies of successful US-based fintech creators in early 2026 show that videos starting with a direct challenge to popular wisdom, such as why the traditional 5-year career plan is becoming a liability, outperform standard advice videos by nearly 40% in initial click-through rates. This creates an immediate cognitive gap that the viewer feels compelled to close by watching the rest of the video. Step 3 is the deployment of the relatability anchor. This is where you introduce a character or a personal story that embodies the struggle of your chosen archetype. Let us look at Sarah, a small business owner in Seattle who sells high-end ceramic kitchenware. Sarah realized that her product shots, while beautiful, were being ignored. She transitioned to the relatability anchor method by showing the failed batches, the late nights at the kiln, and the reality of managing supply chain issues in 2026. She positioned herself not as a distant manufacturer, but as a peer to her customers. This human-centric approach is vital in the US market because it bypasses the skepticism that Americans have toward traditional corporate messaging. As we move deeper into this strategy, we have to talk about the mechanics of the interest graph versus the social graph. In 2026, platforms like YouTube and Instagram have almost entirely abandoned the idea of showing you what your friends like. Instead, they use deep learning models to predict what will keep you on the platform for the next 10 minutes. This means your content is competing globally every single time you post. To win, you must optimize for the signal-to-noise ratio. This involves a technical process called semantic tagging. In the American market, the metadata you provide to the platform must be hyper-specific. If you are a fitness creator, you are no longer just tagging fitness or health. You are tagging recovery-based longevity for former college athletes. This tells the algorithm exactly which pocket of the American population will find your content indispensable. Historical trends in US digital consumption also point to a phenomenon known as the second screen synergy. By 2026, the average American consumer is rarely watching social media in isolation. They are often engaging with a primary screen like a laptop or a television simultaneously. This has led to the rise of passive-active content. This is content that is designed to be listened to as much as it is watched. Step by step, you should be structuring your scripts so that the core value is delivered through high-quality audio narration, while the visuals provide supplementary evidence or emotional weight. This ensures that even if the viewer is distracted, your message is still being processed. Consider the case study of a major US automotive brand that struggled to reach younger buyers. In 2025 and 2026, they shifted their social strategy away from high-budget commercials to a long-form, podcast-style video series featuring real owners discussing their road trip experiences across the United States. They didn't focus on the specs of the car, they focused on the freedom in the stories. The potential outcomes of this strategy included a 22% increase in brand favorability among the 25 to 40 age bracket. They understood that in the American market, the story is the product, and the product is just a character in that story. To truly excel, you must also master the 48-hour feedback loop. In the US, the first 48 hours of a video's life provide a roadmap for its future success. You should be analyzing the moment of peak drop-off with surgical precision. Is there a specific word you said that caused people to leave? Is there a visual transition that felt too much like an advertisement? In 2026, top-tier US creators use this data to perform real-time edits to their thumbnails and titles, and sometimes even re-uploading modified versions of the video to better align with the audience's real-time reaction. This level of agility is what separates the viral channels from the ones that remain stagnant. Furthermore, we must address the concept of community co-creation. The most successful American brands in 2026 are not just talking to their audience, they are building with them. This involves using interactive features like polls, Q&A sessions, and comment-driven content to make the viewer feel like a stakeholder in the channel's success. When a viewer feels like they helped create the content, their loyalty shifts from passive to active. They become advocates who will defend the brand in the comments and share the content within their private networks. This private sharing, often called dark social, is where the real growth happens in the modern US landscape. As we conclude this deep dive into the first strategy, you should have a clear understanding of why identity, friction, and community are the three pillars of the modern American interest graph. But mastering identity is only the beginning. There is a second, more aggressive strategy that involves the actual velocity of your content and how to hack the physiological response of the human eye to keep people watching for 20, 30, or even 60 minutes at a time. This involves a concept known as the pattern interrupt, and it is the secret weapon of the largest media companies in the world. What happens when you learn to manipulate the viewer's sense of time? Why are certain creators able to make a 30-minute video feel like 5 minutes, while others make a 2-minute video feel like an hour? In the next part of this masterclass, we are going to break down the science of visual pacing and the neuromarketing triggers that force the brain to stay engaged even when the viewer intended to scroll past. We will also examine a controversial case study from a US tech mogul who used these exact tactics to build a billion-dollar brand without ever spending a cent on traditional advertising. If you think the identity signal framework was powerful, wait until you see how the world's most successful creators are using the second strategy to dominate the American economy. The second winning strategy for the American market in 2026 is the implementation of the pattern interrupt framework combined with high-velocity visual pacing. To understand why this is non-negotiable, you have to understand the biological state of the average US viewer. By the time they reach your video, they are likely in a state of cognitive autopilot, often referred to as the scroll coma. Their brain is processing thousands of data points a second, looking for a reason to stop, but finding mostly repetitive patterns. The pattern interrupt is a neuromarketing technique designed to physically restart the viewer's attention clock by delivering a sensory input that the brain did not predict. In the 2026 attention economy, if you do not break the pattern within the first 3 seconds, and then every 8 to 12 seconds thereafter, you have already lost the battle for retention. Imagine a creator named Liam in Chicago who runs a channel focused on urban sustainability and high-tech home automation. In 2025, Liam noticed that even though his information was top-tier, his average view duration was plummeting. He was following the old rules of clean, consistent sets and a steady speaking pace. But in 2026, consistency is often interpreted by the human brain as a background noise. Liam pivoted to the high-velocity visual pacing strategy. He began using what we call the zoom phase technique. Instead of staying in a static medium shot, Liam now utilizes digital zooms that pulse in and out based on the emotional weight of his sentences. He integrates J-cuts and L-cuts where the audio from the next scene starts before the current visual ends, creating a psychological pull that forces the viewer to stay to see the visual catch up to the sound. Case studies of channels that adopted this aggressive pacing in early 2026 show a potential outcome of a 15 to 25% increase in average view duration, particularly among the Gen Z and Alpha demographics in the United States. To implement this yourself, you must follow the 3-2-1 editing framework. This is a step-by-step process used by high-growth US channels to ensure visual density. Step 1 is the visual variable injection. Every 3 seconds, there must be a change in the visual state. This does not mean a new location. It could be a text overlay, a change in camera angle, a B-roll insertion, or a simple color grade shift. Step 2 involves the audio reset. Every 2 seconds, the audio profile should have a micro adjustment. This could be a subtle sound effect, a change in background music volume, or an emphasized vocal inflection. Step 3 is the conceptual pivot. Every 1 minute, the overarching subtopic must shift slightly to keep the narrative moving forward. This prevents the feeling of a plateau, which is the primary cause of mid-video drop-off in the American market. Let us look at a deeper case study involving a US-based health and wellness brand, Vitality Lab. In 2026, they were struggling to keep viewers engaged with long-form educational content about nutritional science. Historical trends suggested that American audiences find science-heavy content boring if it lacks visual stimulation. Vitality Lab implemented the overlay inundation strategy. Instead of a spokesperson just talking about cellular health, They use dynamic, floating 3D assets that appeared to interact with the speaker. When the speaker mentioned a specific molecule, a high-definition render of that molecule would slide into the frame, rotating in real time. This provided a dual-track learning experience. The viewer's ears were occupied by the educational content, while their eyes were constantly scanning new, relevant visual data. The potential outcomes of this strategy included a massive spike in returning viewers, as the audience felt they were receiving a premium, high-value experience that could not be found elsewhere. Another critical component of Strategy 2 is the ear candy methodology. In the United States, a significant portion of social media consumption happens with headphones on, especially during commutes or in office environments. This means your sound design is just as important as your 4K resolution. High-retention scripts in 2026 are written with sound cues in mind. You should be using directional audio cues to create an immersive soundscape. If you mention a busy New York street, the viewer should hear the faint, directional sound of a yellow cab honking in their left ear. If you talk about a technical breakthrough, there should be a subtle, high-frequency digital ping. This level of detail triggers a dopaminergic response in the brain, making the content feel more rewarding to consume. It creates a sense of presence that keeps the viewer anchored to the screen. Now, consider the imagine-if scenario of a career coach named Chloe in Los Angeles. Imagine if Chloe stopped giving generic interview advice and started filming her videos in high-stakes, real-world environments. Instead of a home office, she films a pattern-interrupting segment while walking through a crowded financial district, using a wireless lapel mic to maintain crystal-clear audio amidst the chaos. The visual contrast between her calm, authoritative advice and the frantic movement of the city behind her creates a natural pattern interrupt. The American viewer perceives this as more authentic and higher stakes. Step by step, Chloe maps out her visual script before she ever hits record. She identifies the high-impact sentences and pairs them with specific environmental changes, moving from the bright sunlight of a plaza into the moody lighting of a subway station, right as she delivers a more serious, cautionary piece of advice. This alignment of environment and message is the hallmark of professional U.S. content creation in 2026. Expanding on the technical side, we must discuss the shadow SEO of visuals. In 2026, the algorithms are no longer just reading your titles and descriptions. They are visually analyzing every frame of your video. If you are targeting the American market, your visuals need to include recognizable cultural markers that the AI can categorize. This means using specific US-centric backgrounds, products, and even fashion choices that signal to the algorithm that this content is highly relevant to a domestic audience. Historical trends show that videos with clear, high-contrast visual cues perform better in the browse and suggested features of major platforms because the algorithm has a high degree of confidence in who the intended audience is. But even with perfect pacing and stunning visuals, there is a third strategy that most creators completely overlook, and it is perhaps the most powerful tool for long-term sustainability in the United States. While Strategy 1 focused on who you are, and Strategy 2 focused on how you look and sound, Strategy 3 focuses on where your audience actually lives when they are not on the platform. We are moving into the era of the decentralized community, or what many experts call the dark social revolution. In the American market, the most valuable engagement is no longer happening in the public comment sections. It is happening in the private direct messages, the Discord servers, and the encrypted group chats. How do you track a metric you cannot see? How do you create content that is specifically designed to be shared in private circles rather than public feeds? And why is this the secret to the most explosive growth stories of 2026? In the next part of this masterclass, we will break down the mechanics of the shareability coefficient and how to manufacture content that acts as social currency in the American market. We will also examine the specific case of a US startup that reached a multi-million-dollar valuation by ignoring their follower count and focusing entirely on their share-to-view ratio. If you want to move beyond being a creator and start being a cultural catalyst, you cannot afford to miss the final piece of this strategic puzzle. We are going into the depths of the American psyche to understand what makes us hit that share button in a private message, and how you can trigger that response every single time you post. To understand the third and perhaps most critical strategy for the 2026 American market, we have to look at the concept of social currency and the rise of the shareability coefficient. In the previous era of social media, the primary metric was the like. A like was a passive endorsement, a low-effort signal that the content was acceptable. But in the hypersaturated 2026 landscape, likes have become functionally worthless for organic growth. The algorithm now prioritizes what we call the share-to-view ratio, In the United States, social media has shifted from a public square to a series of private dining rooms. This is the era of dark social. Statistics from early 2026 indicate that nearly 80% of all content engagement now occurs in private direct messages, encrypted group chats, and niche Discord servers rather than in the public comment sections. This brings us to strategy 3, the social currency engine. In the American market, people do not share content because it is good, they share content because it makes them look good. Every time a user in New York, Chicago, or Los Angeles hits that share button and sends your video to a friend, they are performing a social transaction. They are using your content to signal their own intelligence, their sense of humor, or their status as someone who is in the know. To win in 2026, you must stop making content for the viewer and start making content that the viewer can use as a tool for their own social climbing. Let us look at a case study involving a financial educator named Avery. In late 2025, Avery was struggling to grow her channel. She was providing excellent, high-level analysis of the American housing market and inflationary trends. Her information was accurate, but her growth was linear and slow. In 2026, Avery pivoted to the social currency engine strategy. Instead of just explaining market data, she began creating what we call the micro-insight anchor. She started identifying one specific, highly provocative, yet data-backed fact every 3 minutes and presenting it in a visual format that was designed to be screenshotted. Imagine a scenario where a young professional in Denver is watching Avery's video. Avery presents a chart showing how historical trends in 2026 urban migration are creating specific pockets of undervalued real estate in the American Midwest. She pauses, looks directly at the camera, and says, "If you know someone who is still trying to buy in a coastal city, send them this chart and tell them they are 5 years too late." By doing this, Avery has given the viewer a reason to share. The viewer doesn't just share the video. They share the video to prove to their friend that they have insider knowledge. The second horseman is relational utility. This is content that solves a problem for someone else. In the US, there is a strong cultural emphasis on being helpful and providing value. Step 2 is to embed a how-to or a checklist within your narrative that is so concise, it can be explained in a single sentence when shared. For example, check out this video. It shows the 3 steps to audit your own digital footprint in under 5 minutes. But there is a catch. You can have the identity signaling, the utility, and the controversy, but if you do not understand the final, most nuanced layer of the American psyche, your strategy will eventually hit a ceiling. There is a specific cultural shift happening right now that is making the US audience more skeptical of even the most clever strategies. It is a movement toward what experts call the post-algorithm era. As we move into the next part of this masterclass, we are going to explore how to future-proof your presence against the total collapse of traditional platform loyalty. What happens when the algorithms that built your empire suddenly change their fundamental logic? How do you maintain control over your audience when the platforms you rely on are constantly moving the goalposts? In Part 5, we are going to dive into the most advanced strategy of all, the sovereign audience framework. This is how the elite 1% of US creators are detaching themselves from the whims of the tech giants and building communities that exist independently of any single platform. We are going to look at the exact technical stack you need and the psychological bridge you must build to ensure that your brand survives the upcoming digital Great Reset. The era of being a platform-dependent creator is coming to an end, and if you are not prepared for what comes next, you are building your house on shifting sand. To navigate the transition into what we call the sovereign audience framework, you must first recognize the fragility of the current digital landscape. In 2026, the algorithmic environment in the United States has reached a state of hyperentropy. Because of the sheer volume of AI-synthesized content, major platforms have been forced to tighten their distribution filters to an extreme degree. This has resulted in what many call the reach cliff, where even established creators with millions of followers can see their organic distribution drop by 90% overnight due to a single back-end update. Relying solely on a platform's feed to reach your audience in 2026 is no longer a business strategy. It is a high-stakes gamble with your livelihood. Imagine a creator named David, living in the tech-heavy corridor of Seattle. David built a massive following throughout the early 2020s by providing deep-dive analysis on emerging software trends. By 2025, David was at the top of his game, but by the start of 2026, he noticed a disturbing historical trend. Despite his subscriber count continuing to climb, his actual views were being throttled by a new algorithmic preference for short-form, high-sensationalism clips. David's long-form, educational deep dives were being buried. This is the moment David realized he was a digital sharecropper, tilling land he didn't own. He decided to implement the sovereign audience framework, and the potential outcomes completely redefined his career. He didn't just survive the algorithm shift, he became immune to it. The step-by-step process of building a sovereign audience begins with Step 1, the migration protocol. In the American market, the most valuable piece of data you can own is a direct line of communication that does not require an intermediary. While many in the past focused on email lists, in 2026, the migration protocol has evolved into a multi-layered approach involving decentralized identity and gated community hubs. You must treat your social media profiles not as the destination, but as the top of a funnel designed to move your most engaged viewers into an environment you control. Step by step, this involves creating a value bridge. You cannot simply ask an American audience to sign up for a newsletter or join a private server. They are already suffering from subscription fatigue. You must offer a high-signal incentive that is unavailable on public platforms. For David, this was a weekly technical white paper that synthesized the week's most complex news into a 5-minute actionable briefing. By offering this, he moved his audience from being passive scrollers to active members of his ecosystem. Historical trends show that a sovereign audience of 10,000 members often generates more stable engagement and higher value than 1 million followers on a public platform. Step 2 is the implementation of the bilateral communication model. Traditional social media is a unilateral broadcast. You speak, and the audience listens. In the sovereign audience framework, the relationship is reciprocal. You must build systems where your audience can interact not just with you, but with each other. In 2026, the U.S. market places a premium on the concept of the mastermind community. Americans are increasingly lonely in the digital space and are looking for professional and social clusters of like-minded individuals. By facilitating these connections, you move from being a content creator to being a community architect. This shift is vital because it creates a network effect within your own platform. If the audience comes for you but stays for the community, your retention becomes permanent. Step 3 involves the technical stack diversification. In 2026, you cannot rely on a single third-party provider for your community hub. We have seen historical cases where community platforms have changed their terms of service or faced sudden outages that paralyzed thousands of businesses. The sovereign creator uses a stack that includes a combination of a self-hosted website, a direct messaging integration, and a decentralized content storage system. This ensures that even if a major tech giant faces a total outage or decides to deplatform a specific niche, your community remains intact and reachable. Let us look at a case study of a mid-sized U.S. education brand that specialized in career transition coaching. In 2025, they were spending 6 figures a month on social media advertising to drive traffic to their videos. By mid-2026, the cost per acquisition on these platforms had tripled due to AI-driven ad bidding wars. They pivoted to the sovereign audience framework, focusing entirely on a private, invitation-only platform for their students. Instead of trying to reach new people every day, they focused on deepening the value for their existing 5,000 members. The potential outcome was a 40% increase in lifetime value per member and a complete elimination of their dependency on paid social ads. They turned their audience into a self-sustaining engine of referrals and peer-to-peer support. Expanding on this, we must address the psychological transition from follower to stakeholder. In the United States, there is a deep-seated cultural value for ownership and agency. When you give your audience a say in the direction of your content or the features of your community, you are tapping into this psychological drive. This involves using transparent feedback loops where the audience can vote on future topics or participate in live-stream strategy sessions. In 2026, the most successful U.S. creators are the ones who are the most transparent. They share their data, their challenges, and their goals, making the audience feel like they are part of a shared mission rather than just consumers of a product. Furthermore, we must analyze the rise of the micro-subscription economy. As the American economy in 2026 continues to navigate complex inflationary pressures, consumers are becoming more discerning about where they spend their time and money. The sovereign audience framework allows for a more flexible, value-based model. Instead of a large, one-size-fits-all subscription, creators are offering micro-tiers of access. This allows you to capture value across a wide spectrum of the American public, from the casual viewer who wants a basic level of community access to the high-level professional who is willing to pay for direct, one-on-one interaction. To truly master this, you need to understand the concept of the content vault. In 2026, your public-facing social media should be considered a trailer for the main event. Your deep dive, high-value content, the kind that actually changes lives or solves complex problems, should be housed within your sovereign vault. This creates a natural curiosity gap. You show the what and the why on YouTube or Instagram, but the how and the step-by-step execution live inside your own ecosystem. This is not about gatekeeping. It is about creating a premium environment where the most dedicated members of your audience can escape the noise of the public feed and focus on the signal. But even with a sovereign audience and a perfect technical stack, there is a hidden variable that can still derail your growth in the American market. It is the one thing that AI cannot replicate and that platforms cannot automate. It is the concept of cultural velocity. While the first three strategies focused on the mechanics, the pacing, and the ownership of your audience, the fourth layer is about the soul of your brand. It is about understanding the specific shifting zeitgeist of the American people as they move through the latter half of 2026. How do you align your brand with the rapidly changing values of a nation that is currently reevaluating its relationship with technology, work, and community? Why are some creators being hailed as heroes while others are being dismissed as relics of a bygone digital era? In the next part of this masterclass, we are going to explore the concept of the cultural mirror. We will break down how to read the American room in real time and how to position your content so that it feels not just relevant but inevitable. We will look at a case study of a creator who went from being a niche enthusiast to a national thought leader by mastering this one specific psychological trigger. You have the mechanics. Now it is time to find the heartbeat of your strategy. What is the one cultural shift in 2026 that no one is talking about, but that will define the winners and losers of the next 5 years? We are about to pull back the curtain on the most nuanced part of the American psyche. The cultural shift that is currently redefining the American digital landscape in 2026 is the transition from curated excellence to radical vulnerability. For over a decade, the American public was conditioned to consume a version of reality that was polished, filtered, and surgically edited. However, historical trends from the past 18 months show a massive psychological pushback. The U.S. audience has developed an advanced detection system for artificiality. In 2026, the moment a viewer senses that a creator is performing a role rather than inhabiting a reality, the trust is severed instantly. This has led to the rise of the cultural mirror strategy, which is the foundational soul of any successful presence in the United States today. To win, you must stop trying to be an authority figure standing on a pedestal and start being a peer who is navigating the same complex world as your audience. Imagine a creator named Marcus based in Atlanta. Marcus is a high-level logistics consultant who, in 2025, tried to build a brand by showcasing his professional accolades and his streamlined office. His content was technically perfect, yet his engagement was stagnant. In early 2026, Marcus made a radical shift. He began a series titled The Monday Morning Audit. Instead of a polished report, he filmed himself at 6 a.m., sitting in his car with a coffee, talking about the specific logistical failure he encountered the week before and the stress it caused his team. He didn't hide the dark circles under his eyes or the fact that he was frustrated. The potential outcomes of this shift were transformative. His comment section, once a ghost town of generic great post remarks, became a hub of deep, professional commiseration. Other American professionals began sharing their own failures. By becoming a mirror of the modern American work experience, exhaustion, resilience, and messy problem-solving, Marcus built a level of authority that no polished commercial could ever replicate. This leads us to the step-by-step implementation of the radical vulnerability framework. Step 1 is the identification of the common struggle. You must look at your niche and ask, what is everyone in the United States currently struggling with but afraid to say out loud? If you are in the fitness space, it might be the fact that most people in 2026 find the traditional gym environment intimidating and inefficient. If you are in the tech space, it might be the hidden anxiety regarding AI job displacement. Once you identify this struggle, you must lead with it. You don't lead with the solution. You lead with the shared pain. This creates an immediate psychological bond. Step 2 is the visual grit protocol. In the US market of 2026, high production value can actually be a liability if it feels cold. To implement visual grit, you should intentionally include what we call organic imperfections. This involves filming in environments that feel lived in. If you are recording a deep dive masterclass, do not use a green screen. Show the bookshelf behind you. Let the viewer see the books you are actually reading. Use natural lighting that changes throughout the day. Historical data suggests that when a viewer sees the light shifting in a room, it signals that the content is real, and that time is actually passing. It anchors the viewer in a physical reality that contrasts with the sterile, timeless nature of AI-generated visuals. Step 3 is the moral of the mess. Vulnerability without a purpose is just venting, which can quickly alienate an American audience. Every time you show a failure or a raw moment, you must tie it back to a specific actionable insight. Step by step, you should structure these segments by stating the situation, revealing the vulnerability, showing the mess, and finally, extracting the data-backed lesson. This ensures that you remain a guide while still being a human. You are essentially saying, I am in the trenches with you, but I found a way to bridge this gap, and here is how you can too. Let us look at a case study of a US-based sustainable fashion brand, TerraThread. In mid-2026, they realized that American consumers were becoming increasingly skeptical of greenwashing. Instead of posting high fashion shoots of their clothes, they started a behind-the-scenes series showing their factory floor during a production delay. They showed the piles of scrap fabric and the honest conversations between the designers about the difficulty of sourcing truly ethical dyes. They even interviewed a warehouse worker about the challenges of the 2026 summer heat waves in the American South. This radical transparency didn't hurt their sales. It solidified their brand as one of the few honest voices in a crowded market. The potential outcomes included a 40% increase in customer retention because the audience felt they were supporting a real group of people, not a faceless corporation. Now, imagine if you applied this to your own content pacing. Imagine if, instead of a perfectly timed transition, you left in a moment where you had to pause and collect your thoughts. In the 2026 US attention economy, that pause acts as a massive pattern interrupt. It breaks the rhythmic, hypnotic flow of the algorithm and forces the viewer to pay attention to the human on the other side of the screen. This is what we call the human-to-human H2H pivot. We are moving away from B2B or B2C and toward a model where the personal connection is the primary driver of all social media value. Expanding on this, we have to talk about the American obsession with the underdog narrative. Despite being a global superpower, the United States has a cultural DNA that celebrates the scrapper, the outsider, and the person who builds from nothing. In 2026, you can use this by positioning your brand or your channel as a challenger to the status quo. This involves identifying a Goliath in your industry. Perhaps it is outdated education systems, corporate greed, or traditional media gatekeepers, and positioning your content as the David. This creates a powerful us versus them dynamic that fuels the social currency strategy we discussed earlier. When someone shares your content, they aren't just sharing a video, they are joining a movement. Furthermore, we must analyze the concept of post-aspirational content. For years, the American market was driven by aspiration, showing a life that the viewer wanted to have. In 2026, the market has shifted toward relatability and attainable excellence. The US consumer is no longer looking for a billionaire to tell them how to live. They are looking for someone who is just 2 steps ahead of them to show them the next move. This is why micro-influencers and niche experts are seeing such historical growth. They are close enough to the audience to be relatable, but far enough ahead to be valuable. To master this cultural mirror strategy, you also need to understand the 2026 trend of analog resurgence. As the digital world becomes more complex, Americans are increasingly craving physical, tangible experiences. You can integrate this into your social media strategy by using what we call physical props. In your videos, use a physical whiteboard instead of a digital overlay. Hold up a physical book. Show a handwritten note. These analog elements provide a sensory anchor that feels grounded in a world that is becoming increasingly ephemeral. But there is a final critical layer to this strategy that ties everything together. It is the concept of the narrative arc of growth. In the United States, we don't just want to see where you are, we want to see where you came from and where you are going. Your social media presence in 2026 should not be a series of disconnected posts. It should be an ongoing story. Every video should feel like a new chapter in a larger journey. How do you structure your content so that a new viewer feels an immediate need to go back and watch everything you have ever posted? How do you create a binge-worthy narrative in a world of 10-second clips? In the next part of this masterclass, we are going to dive into the architecture of the long-form loop. We will explore the secret of the episodic hook and how the most successful US creators are using cinematic storytelling techniques to keep audiences engaged for years, not just minutes. We will look at a case study of a creator who turned a simple hobby into a multimedia empire, by mastering the art of the multi-year story arc. If you think the cultural mirror was deep, wait until you see how we can turn your entire digital presence into a narrative that the American public cannot stop following. We are about to move from strategy into the realm of pure storytelling, and the data behind it will change the way you look at a camera forever. The narrative engine of 2026 is built on a fundamental psychological principle that has outlasted every algorithm update in history. The human brain is physically incapable of ignoring a story that has not reached its conclusion. In the United States, we are seeing a massive historical trend where the most successful creators are no longer producing videos, they are producing seasons. The era of the standalone, one-off viral hit is being replaced by the long-form loop. This is a strategy where every single piece of content acts as a bridge to the next, creating a sense of momentum that forces the viewer into a binge-watching cycle. When you master the architecture of the long-form loop, you aren't just fighting for 10 minutes of attention today. You are securing a place in the viewer's daily routine for the next 6 months. Consider the case study of a creator named Caleb based in Detroit. In early 2026, Caleb started a channel focused on industrial restoration. Under the old rules of social media, Caleb would have simply filmed himself fixing a vintage lathe and posted it as a single video. Instead, Caleb applied the long-form loop. He framed his entire channel around a singular high-stakes mission, restoring a collapsed 1920s tool and die shop to its former glory using only period-accurate tools. By doing this, Caleb shifted the viewer's focus from the technical act of restoration to the emotional outcome of the mission. Every video ended with a cliffhanger regarding a missing part, a structural failure, or a looming deadline. The potential outcomes were staggering. His retention rate for Part 5 of the series was higher than for Part 1, which is a statistical anomaly in the traditional social media world. Caleb wasn't just a woodworker. He was the protagonist of a high-stakes American drama. To implement the long-form loop, you must follow the narrative anchor step by step. Step 1 is the definition of the overarching quest. In the American market, a quest must be quantifiable and difficult. Cannot be I am trying to grow my business. It must be I am attempting to turn this bankrupt warehouse into a carbon-neutral tech hub in 90 days. The specificity of the goal gives the audience a metric for success. In 2026, the US viewer wants to play the role of a silent partner. They want to track your progress, calculate your risks, and feel the dopamine hit when you finally cross the finish line. Step 2 is the creation of the fractal story structure. This is a technical process where you nest smaller stories inside your larger narrative. Every 10-minute video should have its own beginning, middle, and end, but it must also leave one significant thread dangling that can only be resolved in the next episode. Imagine if you are a software developer in Silicon Valley. You might be filming a series on building a new app. The fractal story of one video could be the struggle to fix a specific bug. You resolve the bug by the end of the video, but as the code finally runs, you see a cryptic error message that hints at a much larger infrastructure problem. That is the open loop that ensures the viewer returns tomorrow. Step 3 is the deployment of the relational timestamp. In the United States, the concept of time is a powerful narrative tool. You must constantly remind the audience of where they are in the journey. This involves using visual countdowns, milestone markers, or verbal cues like we are 48 hours away from the launch and the servers are still down. Historical trends in 2026 show that videos utilizing a ticking clock element see a 14% higher average view duration than those without. It creates a physiological sense of urgency that bypasses the viewer's urge to scroll. Let us dive deeper into the science of the episodic hook. In 2026, the first 30 seconds of your video must perform a triple function. It must recap the previous stakes, establish the current conflict, and tease the future resolution. We call this the bridge hook. Instead of saying, "Hey guys, welcome back to the channel," you start with, "Last week we thought the project was dead, but this morning we found a loophole that changes everything, though it might cost us the entire budget by Friday." By doing this, you are acknowledging the long-term viewer while simultaneously hooking the new viewer with immediate high stakes. Now, imagine if you are a career consultant named Maya in New York City. Imagine if Maya didn't just give interview tips but followed one specific, relatable candidate through a high-stakes hiring process at a top-tier tech firm. Maya films the prep sessions, the post-interview anxiety, and the eventual decision. This turns professional advice into a character-driven reality show. The American public in 2026 is obsessed with the process over the result. They want to see the sweat, the doubt, and the granular details of the struggle. Step by step, Maya documents the candidate's journey, using the identity signal framework to make the audience root for the candidate as if they were rooting for themselves. The data behind this is undeniable. In the US market, episodic content has a 30% higher chance of being recommended by the algorithm to the same user. The platforms have recognized that once a user is hooked on a narrative, they are far more likely to remain on the platform for longer sessions. Therefore, the algorithm is incentivized to promote your next chapter to anyone who watched the previous one. This creates a compounding effect where your growth becomes exponential rather than linear. You aren't just looking for new fans. You are building a legacy audience that moves with you through every plot twist. Furthermore, we must address the concept of the narrative reward system. Every time a viewer returns for a new episode, they must be rewarded with a micro payoff. This could be a specialized piece of knowledge, a behind-the-scenes secret, or an emotional breakthrough. In 2026, the American consumer is highly transactional. If they give you their time, they expect a return on that investment. The long-form loop works because it promises a massive final payoff while delivering smaller dividends along the way. This keeps the relationship healthy and prevents the audience from feeling like they are being strung along. But what happens when the story becomes too complex? How do you maintain a narrative arc without losing the casual viewer who just stumbled onto part 7? This is where the synchronized metadata strategy comes into play. In 2026, the most successful US channels use their titles and thumbnails to act as both a standalone hook and a sequence marker. Your thumbnail must tell a story in a single image that is so compelling it works even if the viewer has never heard of you. But for the returning subscriber, that same thumbnail should contain a subtle visual cue, a color, a logo, or a background element that signals exactly where this video fits in the timeline. As we master the art of storytelling, we are essentially becoming architects of human experience. But even the best story can fail if the delivery is not optimized for the specific hardware of the human brain. While we have discussed the narrative, the pacing, and the community, there is a technical layer of the 2026 strategy that involves the actual manipulation of the viewer's physical senses. There is a specific way to use frequency, lighting, and even the speed of your speech to induce a state of flow in your audience. What if I told you that the most successful creators in America are using a specific vocal cadence that mimics the rhythm of a heartbeat to increase trust? What if there was a way to color grade your videos that specifically targeted the relaxation centers of the brain to prevent viewer fatigue? In the next part of this masterclass, we are going to explore the sensory optimization protocol. We will break down the neuroaesthetic trends of 2026 and how you can use the science of perception management to make your content literally addictive. We are moving from the mind of the viewer to the biology of the viewer. If you thought the narrative loop was powerful, wait until you see how we can use the environment itself to lock in your audience. The next level of social media mastery isn't just about what they think, it is about what they feel in their nervous system. We are going to examine the case study of a creator who used these exact sensory triggers to become the most watched person in the United States in under 6 months. The sensory experience of your content in 2026 is the gatekeeper of the American nervous system. While your narrative might be compelling and your community might be strong, if your content creates a physiological friction, the viewer will reject it at a subconscious level before they ever process your message. We are entering the domain of the sensory optimization protocol. This is not about being flashy or using expensive gear. It is about aligning your output with the biological rhythms of your audience. In the United States, we are seeing a massive historical trend toward what psychologists call cognitive ease. This is the mental state where information is processed with minimal effort, leading to higher trust and better retention. To achieve this, you must master the 3 pillars of sensory management: vocal entrainment, chromatic comfort, and spatial audio layering. Let us begin with vocal entrainment. In 2026, the top-performing US creators are using a specific vocal cadence that mimics the rhythm of a human heartbeat at rest, approximately 60 to 70 beats per minute. When a viewer listens to a narrator whose speech pattern is rhythmic and predictable, their own heart rate tends to synchronize with the speaker. This induces a state of calm and focus. Consider the case study of a creator named Ethan based in Miami. Ethan runs a highly technical channel about 2026 aerospace engineering. His topics are dense and could easily lead to viewer fatigue. Ethan implemented the heartbeat cadence by using a metronome during his recording sessions. He timed his key emphasis points to fall on specific beats, creating a rhythmic flow that feels almost musical. The potential outcome was a 20% increase in average watch time on his 20-minute deep dives. The American audience didn't just understand the engineering, they felt physically comfortable while learning it. Step by step, You can implement vocal entrainment by first identifying your base speaking rate. In the US market, the average preferred speed is roughly 150 words per minute, but the rhythm is more important than the speed. You should use a 3-count pause between major sections to allow the brain to reset. This is the verbal equivalent of a palate cleanser. In 2026, where the American consumer is bombarded with high-speed, high-stress audio, your calm and rhythmic delivery acts as a sanctuary. You aren't just a narrator. You are a steady presence in a chaotic digital world. Next, we must address chromatic comfort in the 2026 eye fatigue crisis. The majority of American social media consumption now happens on high-brightness, high-contrast OLED screens. Traditional, oversaturated color grading is now physically painful for long-term viewing. The winning strategy in 2026 is to use what we call the soft log aesthetic. This involves a color grade that reduces peak highlights and utilizes a natural, earthy palette, specifically leaning into ambers and deep greens. These colors are processed more easily by the human eye and do not trigger the same blue light wakefulness response that leads to scrolling irritability. Imagine a scenario where a viewer in a dimly lit apartment in Chicago is scrolling through their feed at 10 p.m. They see a video that is neon, fast-cutting, and harsh. They immediately swipe away. Then they see a video with chromatic comfort grading. The tones are warm, the shadows are lifted, and the overall image feels soft yet clear. Their eyes relax. They stay. Historical trends show that channels that adopted low-fatigue grading in early 2026 saw a significant rise in late-night viewership and return visitor rates. Step by step, you should audit your color grade by viewing your content on different devices at maximum and minimum brightness. If your highlights are clipping or your colors feel radioactive, you are pushing the viewer away. Aim for a grade that feels like a high-end film from the late 20th century, textured, organic, and easy on the eyes. The third pillar is spatial audio layering. In 2026, the American public has almost entirely transitioned to spatial audio-enabled earbuds. This means your audio is no longer a flat mono signal in their head. It is a three-dimensional environment. If your audio is just a single voice track, it feels unnatural and thin. To win, you must use what we call the environmental floor. This involves layering a very low-volume track of ambient room tone or natural outdoor sounds behind your narration. This provides a subconscious sense of place. Let us look at a case study of a creator named Julian, who became the most watched educator in the US in under 6 months by mastering these triggers. Julian didn't have a massive budget. He filmed in a simple home office, but he used a binaural microphone setup to record his environment. When he spoke, the viewer could hear the faint three-dimensional sound of a pen scratching on paper or the distant hum of a city street. This created a sense of presence that made the viewer feel like they were sitting in the room with him. The potential outcome for Julian was the highest trust score in his niche. People felt they knew him because they had lived in his space for 10 minutes at a time. Step by step, you can create spatial audio layering by using 3 distinct audio tracks. Track 1 is your clean, compressed narration. Track 2 is your environmental floor, subtle directional ambient noise at -30 decibels. Track 3 is your punctuation layer. Short, sharp sound effects that emphasize transitions or key data points. In the 2026 US market, this level of audio depth is what separates the amateurs from the professionals. It creates a high-fidelity experience that the brain perceives as more valuable and more authoritative. Now, consider the concept of perception management. This is the overall psychological impression your content leaves on the viewer. In 2026, the American audience is looking for what we call the expert-peer hybrid. You must look and sound like an expert, but you must feel like a peer. This is achieved through the subtle use of your environment. Step by step, you should design your background to include 3 layers of depth. Layer 1 is the foreground, perhaps a coffee cup or a notebook slightly out of focus. Layer 2 is you, the subject, in sharp focus. Layer 3 is the background, with a soft blur showing books, plants, or a window. This depth mimics how the human eye naturally perceives the world, making the content feel more real and less like a digital construction. Expanding on this, we have to talk about the 2026 trend of organic framing. For years, the rule was to keep the subject perfectly centered. In the current US market, we are seeing a shift toward the rule of thirds and even off-center framing. This feels less like a news broadcast and more like a natural conversation. When you sit slightly to the left or right of the frame, you leave negative space that can be used for your dynamic text overlays, creating a more balanced and professional visual composition. This is a technical detail that signals high-tier production without needing high-tier costs. Historical data from mid-2026 suggests that viewers are 50% more likely to engage with content that feels personalized to their physical environment. This means if it is winter in the United States, your lighting and environmental cues should reflect that. If you are filming during a major national event, the tone of your content should subtly acknowledge the collective mood. This is the ultimate level of sensory optimization, aligning your content with the external world of your audience. But even with perfect sensory triggers, your strategy is incomplete without the final, most powerful component of the 2026 social media landscape. We have covered the identity, the pacing, the community, the storytelling, and the biology. Now we must address the ghost in the machine, the algorithmic psychology. While we have focused on the human viewer, we must also understand how the machine that delivers the content thinks. The relationship between the human and the algorithm in the United States is more complex than ever. What happens when you learn to feed the algorithm the exact data points it needs to categorize you as a Tier 1 creator? Why do some videos with perfect metrics still fail to go viral, while others with average metrics explode? In the next part of this masterclass, we are going to dive into the core of the 2026 algorithmic logic. We will explore the concept of the velocity of intent, and how you can manipulate the machine's prediction models to ensure your content is always at the top of the feed. We are going to look at a case study of a US media brand that cracked the code of the 2026 algorithm and gained 10 million subscribers in a single quarter. We are moving from the biological to the digital, and the secrets we are about to reveal will give you a level of control over your reach that most creators think is impossible. The machine is watching, and it is time you learned exactly what it wants to see. To understand the 2026 algorithmic logic, you must first accept that the machine is no longer looking for keywords. It is looking for intent alignment. We have moved into the era of neural recommendation engines. In the United States, the primary platforms now utilize a multi-dimensional vector space to categorize content. This means every frame, every spoken word, and even the emotional sentiment of your comments section is converted into a numerical value. The algorithm then maps these values against the real-time psychological state of millions of American users. If your video's vector aligns with the user's current velocity of intent, you are shown. If not, you are invisible. This is why the velocity of intent has become the most important metric of 2026. Velocity of intent is defined as the speed and conviction with which a user moves toward a specific topic. Historical trends show that in 2026, the algorithm can predict what a user wants to watch up to 30 minutes before they even open the app, based on their cross-platform behavior. For example, if an American user in Philadelphia is researching urban gardening on a search engine, and then discusses it in a private message, their intent velocity for gardening content is at a peak. If you publish a video on that topic at that exact moment, you aren't just getting a view, you are getting an algorithmic boost because you solved the machine's prediction model. Let us look at a case study of a US-based media brand called Vertex Media, which operated out of New York City. In early 2026, Vertex Media achieved an unprecedented historical milestone by gaining 10 million subscribers in a single quarter. They did not do this through luck or high-budget celebrity cameos. They used a strategy called preemptive content mapping. They used AI-driven sentiment analysis to track rising conversational topics across the United States 24 hours before they hit the mainstream news cycle. By the time the general American public was searching for these topics, Vertex Media already had high-retention, high-quality videos ready to be served. They essentially provided the answer before the audience even finished asking the question. This allowed them to capture the initial wave of intent velocity, which signaled to the algorithm that their channel was the authoritative source for that specific cultural moment. To implement this level of algorithmic manipulation, you must follow the technical signal injection process. Step 1 is cross-platform echoing. In 2026, the machine values external signals more than internal ones. Before you upload your video, you must generate a trail of digital breadcrumbs. This involves seeding the core concepts of your video on high-authority forums, niche Discord servers, and professional networks. When the algorithm sees a sudden spike in search volume for a specific phrase that is also the primary topic of your upcoming video, it prepares a high-priority slot for your content. This is how you manufacture a trend rather than just following one. Step 2 is the metadata enrichment protocol. While we said keywords are secondary, they are still the baseline for the machine's initial categorization. In the 2026 US market, you need to use what we call semantic clustering. Instead of using a single tag, you provide a cluster of related concepts that define the context. If your video is about American career growth in 2026, you don't just use career. You use a cluster that includes remote work legislation, AI integration skills, and Midwestern urban migration. This tells the neural network exactly which neighborhood of the vector space your content belongs in, ensuring you are not served to a general audience that will drop off and kill your retention, but to a high-intent audience that will watch until the end. Step 3 is the retention cliff management. In 2026, the algorithm performs a real-time health check on your video in the first 5 minutes of its life. If the drop-off in the first 30 seconds is more than 20%, the machine immediately stops the outward push. To prevent this, successful US creators use what we call the visual bridge. They ensure that the thumbnail image is a literal frame from the first 3 seconds of the video. This creates a psychological sense of continuity for the American viewer. There is no cognitive friction between clicking and watching. Case studies show that this simple alignment can increase the initial retention rate by up to 15%, which is often the difference between a video that dies at 10,000 views and one that reaches 10 million. Imagine if you are a content strategist named Elena in San Francisco. Elena is working with a tech startup that wants to dominate the 2026 social landscape. Imagine if Elena stopped focusing on what the viewers liked and started focusing on what the machine predicted they would like next. She begins using a technical tool called a latent Dirichlet allocation model to identify hidden topics in the American social discourse. She finds a rising concern about the longevity of digital assets in 2026. She produces a series of videos that address this specific, unvoiced anxiety. Because she is the only one providing content for this latent intent, the algorithm has no choice but to serve her videos to every user whose behavior suggests they are worried about digital permanence. The potential outcome for Elena's client is a total monopoly on a high-value niche before the competition even knows the niche exists. This leads us to the concept of visual AI and frame-by-frame labeling. By 2026, the major social platforms in the United States have integrated advanced computer vision into their recommendation engines. The machine is literally watching your video as you upload it. It labels every object it sees: your clothing, the books on your shelf, the brand of laptop on your desk. These objects act as secondary metadata. If you are making content for a high-income American demographic, the machine expects to see certain visual markers associated with that lifestyle. If your background is messy or poorly lit, the algorithm might categorize your content as low quality and serve it to a different, less engaged demographic. Step by step, you should audit your filming environment to ensure every object in the frame is a deliberate signal to the machine about who your audience should be. Furthermore, we must address the sentiment loop. In 2026, the tone of your comment section is a direct ranking factor. The American market is highly sensitive to toxicity, and the algorithm is trained to suppress content that generates negative sentiment. However, it prioritizes content that generates constructive debate. To win, you must engage in active comment architecture. This involves pinning a comment that asks a nuanced, open-ended question that requires more than a one-word answer. When the machine sees long, complex responses in the comments, it interprets the content as highly valuable and intellectually stimulating, which triggers a wider distribution to the academic and professional sectors of the US audience. The final layer of the 2026 algorithmic strategy is the concept of the refresh rate of authority. In the United States, your authority on a topic has a half-life. If you stop posting or if your engagement dips for a period of time, the machine begins to doubt your relevance. This is why consistency is not about the calendar but about the signal. You must provide a consistent stream of high-velocity intent signals to keep the machine's confidence score high. If you do this, you eventually reach a state of algorithmic trust, where every video you post is automatically pushed to a massive seed audience because the machine has determined that your brand is a low-risk, high-reward bet for the user's attention. But even with the machine on your side, and even with the perfect sensory triggers and narrative loops, there is one final hurdle that every US creator must face as we move into the end of 2026. It is the moment of the great transition. All these strategies are designed to get you to the top, but staying there requires a completely different set of skills. We have discussed how to capture the American market, but we have not yet discussed how to lead it. What happens when you are no longer the challenger but the incumbent? How do you protect your brand from the very strategies you just used to climb the ladder? In the final part of this masterclass, we are going to synthesize everything we have learned into a single unified theory of digital dominance. We will explore the concept of the legacy shield and how to build an unbreakable brand that can withstand the next decade of technological upheaval. We will look at the final case study of the only creator in American history to stay at #1 for 5 consecutive years without ever changing their core team. We are going about to close all the loops and give you the final blueprint. The end of the beginning is here, and the real masterclass is just about to reach its climax. Are you ready to see the full picture of what it means to own the American attention economy? To lead the American market in the final quarter of 2026, you must transition from being a content producer to becoming a cultural architect. We have arrived at the pinnacle of this masterclass: the legacy shield and the unified theory of digital dominance. This is the strategy used by the elite 1% of US creators to protect their influence from the inevitable decay of platform trends. In 2026, the average life cycle of a social media star has shrunk to less than 18 months. The legacy shield is a structural framework designed to extend that life cycle indefinitely by decoupling your brand from any single algorithm and anchoring it into the permanent cultural fabric of the United States. Consider the case study of a creator named Marcus, who we discussed earlier. By late 2026, Marcus had moved beyond his Monday morning audit series. He realized that while his videos were successful, he was still dependent on the platform's willingness to serve them. He implemented the legacy shield by launching the distributed authority model. He didn't just make videos about logistics. He founded a physical logistics innovation hub in Atlanta that partnered with local universities. He used his social media as a transparent window into this real-world institution. By doing this, Marcus made his brand anti-fragile. If his YouTube channel disappeared tomorrow, his authority would remain because it is backed by physical infrastructure and human relationships that exist outside the digital vector space. The potential outcome was a brand that transitioned from a digital creator to a national industry leader, a shift that historically results in a tenfold increase in long-term enterprise value. The first step-by-step component of the legacy shield is the narrative continuity protocol. In the US market, your audience's loyalty is tied to the internal consistency of your story. In 2026, viewers are highly sensitive to brand drift. To implement this, you must create a brand Bible that dictates not just your visual style, but your philosophical boundaries. Step 1 is the definition of your non-negotiable truths. These are the 3 to 5 core beliefs that your brand will never contradict, regardless of what is trending. For a tech creator, this might be a commitment to privacy over convenience. For a fitness creator, it might be a commitment to longevity over aesthetics. Historical trends show that creators who maintain a consistent philosophical North Star have a 40% higher retention rate during periods of cultural volatility. Step 2 is the deployment of sentiment arbitrage. This is an advanced 2026 technique where you monitor the gap between what the American public is being told by mainstream institutions and what they are actually feeling in their private communities. You position your brand in that gap. For example, if mainstream media is reporting a boom in a certain sector, but your dark social data shows that workers in that sector are experiencing high levels of burnout and anxiety, you create content that validates their reality. You are essentially performing a psychological arbitrage, buying up the trust that the mainstream institutions have abandoned. This makes your brand an indispensable source of truth for your specific niche. Step 3 involves the human-in-the-loop AI scaling. By late 2026, every major US channel is using AI to generate scripts, edit footage, and manage community interactions. However, the channels that are failing are the ones that have removed the human element entirely. To win, you must use a step-by-step process of synthetic augmentation. You use AI to handle the high-volume, low-context tasks, like resizing videos for different platforms or generating initial research briefs, but you personally handle the high-context, high-empathy tasks. This is the 80-20 rule of 2026. 80% of your production can be AI-assisted, but the 20% that provides the emotional soul must be raw and human. Case studies of successful US media companies show that content with a verified human-in-the-loop signature sees 22% higher engagement than purely synthetic content. Now imagine a scenario where the 2026 internet undergoes a fundamental shift. A new platform emerges that uses a completely different set of rules, or a major legislative change restricts how data is used in the United States. Imagine if you were the only creator in your niche who didn't panic. Why? Because you have already implemented the sovereign audience framework and the legacy shield. Your audience doesn't find you through a feed. They find you through a direct, intentional connection. You have moved from the attention economy to the intentional economy. In this new world, the value of a single intentional viewer is worth more than 10,000 accidental scrollers. Expanding on the technical side, we must address the concept of the multi-node distribution. In 2026, you cannot just be on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. You must exist in a multi-node network that includes private servers, decentralized video protocols, and even physical print or direct mail components. Step by step, you should build a distribution map where each node serves a specific psychological need of your audience. Your short-form content provides the dopamine. Your long-form content provides the education. Your private community provides the connection. And your physical touchpoints provide the reality. This creates a 360-degree ecosystem that surrounds the American consumer, making it nearly impossible for them to lose contact with your brand. Historical data from the 2026 US market indicates that the biggest risk to a creator is not the algorithm, but brand dilution. As you grow, there is a temptation to expand into every available niche. But the legacy shield requires you to maintain a high-density focus. You must become a deep-water expert in one specific area before you ever attempt to broaden your horizons. This is the concept of the authority anchor. Once you have anchored your authority in a single unshakable niche, you can use that as a base to explore adjacent markets. But you must never pull up the anchor. To synthesize everything we have covered in this 10-part masterclass, let us look at the unified theory of digital dominance. It is the perfect alignment of identity, pacing, currency, vulnerability, narrative, sensory, and intent. When you combine these elements, you create a content engine that is self-correcting. If your pacing is off, your narrative carries you. If the algorithm changes, your sovereign audience protects you. If the culture shifts, your radical vulnerability allows you to adapt without losing trust. You are no longer at the mercy of the digital winds. You are the one creating the weather. As we conclude this deep dive, you must realize that the strategies of 2026 are not just about social media. They are about the future of human communication in a post-AI world. The American public is hungry for leaders, for truth-tellers, and for creators who respect their time and their intelligence. You have the blueprint. You have the step-by-step processes. You have the data-backed frameworks. The only variable left is your execution. The transition from a passive viewer of this masterclass to an active practitioner of these strategies is where the real value is created. What is the first step you will take today to secure your legacy shield? How will you restructure your next video to incorporate the velocity of intent? The era of the amateur is over, and the era of the professional cultural architect has begun. But the landscape of 2026 is still evolving. Even as you implement these winning strategies, new variables are emerging in the realms of augmented reality and direct neural interfaces that will challenge everything we know about attention. How do you prepare for a world where the screen itself begins to disappear? What happens when social media moves from your phone to your field of vision? In the next evolution of our training, we will move beyond the screen and into the world of immersive social dynamics. We are going to look at the first case studies of creators who are already dominating the spatial computing market in the US and how you can position yourself for the 2027 shift before it even arrives. The masterclass never truly ends. It only evolves. Are you ready for the next frontier?